Hello, BookTube, and welcome to another fiction review. Now, I've been racking my brains today, just trying to think of a preamble to this video, and I know it's not necessary, of course, but most social interactions, they start with a little bit of stuff that doesn't really matter. I always think it gives people time, to get settled and, with their hot drink, although that said, that's seeing things through English eyes and English eyes in winter as well. For anyone who might be watching from south of the equator, please feel free to make yourself a cold drink. And if you happen to be listening to this lying in a hammock in the shade, I'll try hard not to be envious. Today, we will review the novel Of Love and Other Demons by Garbriel Garcia Marquez. The Spanish edition of that book came out in 1994, the English translation by Penguin in 1996. Let's pitch this novel. How many ways are there to be unhappy? Garbriel Garcia Marquez seems to define unhappiness in terms of the number of rules or social habits, taboos, that a person imposes on themselves or on others, and that prevents them from loving themselves or loving others. And when unhappy people have power, then they can create an entire society where love becomes almost impossible, indeed where it becomes unrecognizable, and even where it is mistaken for something evil. Where did I obtain this book, and how much did I pay? Well, this is another library book. Yeah, it's a trend, isn't it? Well, actually, I had 3 library books already signed out before I decided that I was going to start the Read What You Own challenge. And my goal for that is to read 50 of my own books over the next 12 months. Now, I didn't make a rule forbidding library books. Didn't want to do that for reasons I've explained in other videos. But to push myself a little, I decided that I wasn't going to count these 3. So Black Tutors that I reviewed on Thursday, today's book, and another book that you'll have me review later, they're going to be in addition to the 50. And so that's why the counter that you see on screen is always going to be counting down from 53 rather than 50. But as I said, I can include library books in the goal figure of 50 if I want to. They kind of count as owned books to me, because we pay taxes and they fund the libraries. Yeah. This Penguin paperback edition, by the way, it would make a fantastic read if you are looking right now for a short book. It is only 160 pages long, but the font is at least 12 point and there's good spacing between the lines. So I found that I finished it very quickly. Some information about the author. Garbriel Garcia Marquez was born in 1927 in a Colombian village called Arataca, which is the red dot that you can see on this map. I've also circled the port city of Cartagena because this is the setting for Of Love and Other Demons. Garcia Marquez attended the University of Bogota to read law, but he gave up his studies in 1948, the beginning of what is called La Violencia, the 10-year period of civil war between the country's 2 political parties. He moved to Cartagena and took up a career in journalism. While on assignment overseas, he learned that the Colombian government had closed the newspaper that employed him. It took him some time before he could make his way back home, and during that time, he started writing stories, something that he'd loved doing since boyhood. He continued to write fiction alongside journalism for various publications. He also traveled widely. He lived in Venezuela, in Cuba, in New York, and in Mexico during the 1960s. In 1965, he began work on what became his greatest novel, 100 Years of Solitude. Harper & Row published the English edition in 1970, and the book drew universal acclaim. The term magic realism, which had been a concept applied to German visual art, began to be used to describe the fictional realities of Garcia Marquez's writing. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1982. His friendship with Cuban leader Fidel Castro and political sympathies kept him labeled a subversive in America, and he wasn't able to visit the United States again until President Clinton lifted that ban. In addition to novels and stories, Garbriel Garcia Marquez also wrote screenplays and collaborated in the making of a television series. And there's also a previously unpublished novel titled Until August, which, according to instructions in the author's will, is due to be released next year to mark the 10th anniversary of his death in 2014. Let's talk about the setting now. Photographically, first, the photographs that you're going to see in this video are examples of South American stained glass. This one that you see now is from Santiago, Chile. Now, Of Love and Other Demons is set in Cartagena, the port city that I'd circled on the previous map. The story events probably happen early in the 17th century when much of present-day Colombia was part of the new state of Granada, territory seized by the Spanish, who were, along with the Portuguese, the first European colonizers in the New World. Cartagena was a mercantile hub then, traded in sugar, in cacao, in tobacco, and in human beings. Garcia Marquez chose this time and place because of a reporting assignment in 1949 when he was sent to cover the demolition of the disused convent of Santa Clara, which included the removal of human remains from the crypt. I'm now going to read from the author's foreword. The surprise lay in the third niche of the high altar on the side where the Gospels were kept. The stone shattered at the first blow of the pickaxe, and a stream of living hair, the intense color of copper, spilled out of the crypt. The foreman, with the help of the laborers, attempted to uncover all the hair, and the more of it they brought out, the longer and more abundant it seemed, until at last the final strands appeared, still attached to the skull of a young girl. Nothing else remained in the niche except a few small scattered bones, and on the dressed stone eaten away by saltpeter, only a given name with no surnames was legible: Sierva Maria de Todos los Angeles. Spread out on the floor, the splendid hair measured 22 meters. When I was a boy, my grandmother had told me the legend of a little 12-year-old Marquez with hair that trailed behind her like a bridal train, who had died of rabies caused by a dog bite and was venerated in the towns along the Caribbean coast for the many miracles she had performed. The idea that the tomb might be hers was my news item for the day, and the origin of this book. Regarding the narrative viewpoint and the narrative voice, the narrative voice is third person and omniscient, so it's that X-ray vision into the hearts of many characters. From all that psychic visibility, I got repeated impressions of individuals who were cut off in one way or another. The presence of slaves, of course, and slave trading provided a constant backdrop in the novel. You are always aware of people who have been cut off from their homeland, cut off from their culture, but also cut off from the Europeans they live alongside and work for. Now, the narrator concentrates his attention on the Spanish characters of Cartagena, and it seemed to me they have also cut themselves off from something important, all because of this inhuman imperial business. I'm going to quote some dialogue from page 101. The bishop could not continue because the thunder resounded over the house and then rolled out to sea, and a biblical downpour cut them off from the rest of the world. The bishop lay back in the rocking chair and was shipwrecked in nostalgia. How far we are, he sighed. From what? From ourselves, said the bishop. This is the point that I believe Garcia Marquez wishes to make, that the combination of Inquisition zeal and Spain's cruel pursuit of wealth at any cost, it damaged slave and master. But in the master's case, the damage is, well, it's bizarre because they control it, right? It's the product of their own choices. So the Spanish characters that you encounter in this novel, they all are practicing this self-imposed spiritual and emotional bondage and isolation. The convent of Santa Clara, which was occupied at the time, is a symbol of this bondage, but so is the impenetrable jungle and the immense ocean that separates Colombia from Europe. Love, in this context, it's a lost concept. When it happens, no one responds to it the way they should. Does this novel fit a genre category? The only other novel I've read by Garcia Marquez was The Autumn of the Patriarch. And so I don't feel that I have experienced his reputed magic realism yet. I've always associated magic realism with Isabel Allende and the House of the Spirits, where supernatural things are actually happening. The reader is reading about them as if they experience them. And they experience them as if they're everyday occurrences. That's how they're described. It is true that Of Love and Other Demons is set during a time in history where more Europeans believed in the supernatural and attributed things to the supernatural. But most of the occurrences in the narrative, they're just told to you. They're hearsay rather than being shown on the page. And this leaves the modern reader with the option to doubt. And yet, the story's oppressive atmosphere and all the damaged personalities, they do tip the scales away from realism towards something else. I think I would call it more uncanny or surreal. What, if anything, stands out as an aspect of this novel? Well, if you've read any Gabriel Garcia Marquez before, it's likely that you've encountered novels where you feel unhinged in time and space. This story, by contrast, is told in chronological order, more conventionally, if you like, and it has an opening page that I think any contemporary agent would love for its pulling power. I will read. An ash-grey dog with a white blaze on its forehead burst onto the rough terrain of the market on the first Sunday in December, knocked down tables of fried food, overturned Indian stalls and lottery kiosks, and bit 4 people who happened to cross its path. 3 of them were black slaves. The 4th, Sierva Maria de Todos los Angeles, the only child of the Marquis de Casalduero, had come there with a mulata servant to buy a string of bells for the celebration of her 12th birthday. They had been instructed not to go beyond the arcade of the merchants, but the maid ventured as far as the drawbridge in the slum of Gethsemane, attracted by the crowd at the slavers' port, where a shipment of blacks from Guinea was being sold at a discount. For the past week, a ship belonging to the Compañía Gaditana de Negros had been awaited with dismay because of an inexplicable series of deaths on board. In an attempt at concealment, the unweighted corpses were thrown in the water. The tide brought them to the surface and washed the bodies, disfigured by swelling and a strange magenta coloring, up onto the beach. And that quote should be sufficient to answer the question, is there problematic content in this book? Yes, there is, and there is more of that to come. Now, the purpose of it, I think, is allegorical. The novel is examining what human beings can become if they trap themselves in ways of thinking that, as the bishop says, cut themselves off from themselves. They become cruel. The novel is a reflection of the author's openly left-of-center political viewpoint, and so I believe he creates this story about the greed and abuse of power in the 17th century to make a point about the present. So to sum up this review of Love and Other Demons, it's a little book, but it feels so much weightier, as if it had a couple of hundred more pages. I needed a switch after that. I don't mean something less serious. I just mean something where the writing balanced out happiness with sadness a little bit better. And I think I've found that. So that's what I'll be covering in a fiction review soon. I have also started to prepare another Middlemarch meditation. So I'll leave you guessing as to which one of those 2 things is going to appear on YouTube on Thursday. Thanks for watching, everybody. To anyone out there who's doing their own Read What I Own challenge, I hope you meet all your goals. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.